I wish on behalf of John Paul II Junior College to welcome our guest speakers for this seminar, a longtime acquaintances and highly respected people, and fairly known in Belize as well. Dr. Anabel Ford and Mrs. Cynthia Ellis Topsey. I guess that whatever I may say as a sort of introduction would fall short in saying the many projects that Dr. Ford and Ms. Cynthia Ellis are involved in. But from the documents that Dr. Ford sent us and which have been distributed to the students, the students of John Paul II, and which I encourage you to look at prior to this presentation. Dr. Anabel Ford is a professor at University of California, Santa Barbara, and she is very much involved, and I guess the coordinator, if I should say, the mastermind behind the a botanical project, archaeological project at El Pilar. And I know Miss Cynthia Ellis, who's a cultural activist, promoter, educator, is also a collaborator with Dr. Ford. So I welcome both Dr. Ford and Mrs. Cynthia Ellis Topsey. And I welcome the students of John Paul II Junior College, a Belizean Studies group. And I also wish to welcome all those friends and collaborators who, throughout the world, I should say, through this medium, a virtual medium, have expressed a desire to be a part of this event. And we hope that all of you will enjoy and take it as an opportunity to I am sorry, the disadvantage of being at home, you know, in a small community and all these happenings on the street. But thank you very much, and I welcome all those who have connected this evening. So without any further ado, I leave the floor open to Dr. Ford.
Well, I want to bring in, it doesn't go in the start, just excuse me, it started. We want to talk about the heroes of the Maya Forest. These are both past and present. And I want to turn this over to Cynthia to say a few words that will bookend the kinds of things we want to talk about the past and the present in Cayo, in Belize, including the Living Museum of El Pilar and the Maya Forest. Cynthia?
Dr. Ford, before Ms.
Yes.
Cynthia gets in, questions, can we ask our questions during the presentation, or will you leave?
They can ask it along the way, but you know what you should do is have or yourself or can Justin say that there's somebody wants to ask a question?
Yeah, there you are asked to raise your hand. There is an icon there to raise your hand, and then Justin or can interrupt and
yeah, just say there's a question, and or even they can say there's a question.
Okay, good.
But maybe that's easier if they send in the chat. I have a question, and I will try to be slow enough so they can catch it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that if it's students, we want to answer them right away. And if there's some questions. Okay, Cynthia.
Thank you, everyone. I just hope my reception is better now.
Sounds good.
Okay, it's an honor and a privilege, and I give God thanks for this opportunity to be a part of what is a historic collaboration. I want to thank you publicly and officially, Dr. Ford, for being one of the few archaeologists here in Belize who embraces and includes Belizeans as a part of this journey. I began on this journey when my ancestral husband, Harriet Topsey, transitioned over 25 years ago. And it was in my search to appreciate and to understand what he was doing as a Belizean, not just for Belize, but for the world, that I met Dr. Anabel Ford. And on that journey, we have never looked back as two women from different backgrounds walking together in what has been a phenomenal experience. I thank you, Mr. David, for the vision to appreciate the wealth untold that we have here in Belize. And I would like for us to challenge the students and all who are listening at this time to see this technology as an opportunity during this time of COVID, as a blessing for us to push ourselves and press ourselves beyond the ordinary to appreciate the extraordinary gifts that God has given us. Having been on this journey of archaeology under the canopy of the rainforest, Dr. Ford and I have walked the talk, and we have done many things that she will be sharing today. I am actually on my way to Barranco. I am in Dangriga, and I have stopped specifically so that I could be a part of this conversation because it's very powerful and it's very important. And when I first became aware of El Pilar 12 years ago, really deeply aware, I had vaguely heard about El Pilar through Dr. Joseph Palacio, who was the first Belizean archaeologist. And my husband at that time, Harriet Topsey, and my father, God's man, Ellis. I want to present them because it is through this journey with Dr. Ford that I began to be aware of the tremendous amount of work that has been done. And students and participants, we would like that by the end of this sharing, that you too will want to be a part of this tremendous movement. Immediately when I became aware of forest gardening and forest gardeners, I called Dr. Rene Villanueva and told him about what was going on. And he came and brought his camera crew and followed Dr. Ford all the way, and myself walking through El Pilar. So this is an exciting opportunity for us to look at the gifts that El Pilar offers, not just for Belize, but for the world, especially at this time when we are challenged to be innovative in our way of being self-sustaining. We don't speak about food security. We learn through El Pilar about food sovereignty. We learn through El Pilar about climate change. We learn through El Pilar about the 20 dominant plants of the Maya. We learn through El Pilar, the gift that the Maya has given is for all the ethnic groups and for all of Belize. We have learned, or I have learned, walking with Dr. Ford, that there are Mestizo forest gardeners, there are Garifuna forest gardeners, there are Creole forest gardeners, there are forest gardeners of all the ethnic groups. And I would like at this time to really celebrate the fact that by engaging with nature, by being in tune, by doing a deep listening of the gifts that God has given us, that we can align the science and the technology with the way of being spiritually. I remember when Father Tony came to El Pilar, he was like a child in a toy shop. He was so excited about the different aspects of the El Pilar site. So I just want to thank you for the privilege and for the honor, and Dr. Ford, for allowing me as a non-archaeologist. She already says that I am an archaeologist in action. And I will leave you at this time to continue. And Mr. David, thank you once again. I will be meeting with Dr. Palacio in Barranco, and perhaps we can invite Dr. Palacio as the first Belizean archaeologist and anthropologist as we are engaging to see how we are going to press forest gardening among the Garifuna communities. I also want to close by honoring the life of Francis Lewis from Hopkins, who recently transitioned a couple of days ago. Thank you and have a beautiful session. God bless you and I love you.
Thank you very much, Miss Cynthia. It is always good to hear you. And please do present our highest considerations and assurances to Dr. Palacio. I know him fairly well, and tell him that at some point we will connect with him as well. So thank you very much and safe journey to Barranco.
Okay. My spirit will be a little bit different, but it's still aligned with Miss Cynthia, and I really couldn't do much of what I am involved with in the outreach without her. And I really appreciate her wealth of knowledge that she brings to our project. So I know you had some introduction to the Maya already, and so this should be an added way to look at things when you are considering where the Maya came from, where your families come from, where you're the place where you're actually now, and I am not, sadly. You have to think about how the peopling of this world, it's called the New World, came. They came from the across a land bridge that was from the Siberia area today, was not separated. And people moved across that more than 12,000 years ago. They came with the skills of how to work stone and how to manage fire. And those were the kinds of things that the whole continents of North and South America, including Central America, were managed by until the Spanish rudely invaded and conquered the area. They expanded initially as what we call hunters and gatherers, very much involved with the landscape, getting to know the landscape, and adapted to many changes that were happening between 12,000 and 8,000 years ago. The land that you're sitting on right now was very arid, and it became humid and forested around 8,000 years ago. So you have to think that there's a lot of changes that were happening. In fact, it was warming. And it was that change that really brought the kinds of changes that we see happening in the landscape that we call the Maya civilization. I have a little insert there you can see, let's see, and it shows the areas that as hunters and gatherers where people would have congregated. And you can see the Maya area here is very prominently displayed as a destination for good hunting and gathering. Of course, you know where you are in the southern part of Mesoamerica, the Maya area, and I hope you know where El Pilar is. It's to the north, almost directly north from where you are right now if you're in Benque, an area where I've spent a good deal of my life, perhaps 4 decades I've been working in the Maya forest, and almost all that time in the El Pilar area obviously holds a big attraction. You probably have heard a little bit about the time periods, but I want to just go over them just so you bear in mind the last 8,000 years have had a lot of kinds of changes on the landscape, basically due to the way people use the landscape. As I said, when they first came into this region, they were getting to know where the rivers were, where the uplands were, where the different geographic features that they could use. And of course, as the tropical forest expanded in this area, they were getting to know the landscape with the trees and the animals that came with them. Somewhere around 4,000 years ago, there was a big climate perturbation, you could say, and that really brought a settlement to this area. So we have the middle Preclassic and late Preclassic are the early periods of the development of the Maya civilization. And then the early Classic and late Classic is the height of the civilization. Terminal and post-Classic is a time period when there were a lot of changes, but still people living in that area. And of course, the colonial period is another part of Belizean studies that reflects both national and global changes along the area. And you can see below that there are a lot of different human ecological changes that bring you from hunting and gathering to early settlements and the centers, and different ways of land use, from mobile horticulturalists, which were living in the forest, just like you see today, to more centralized systems. And we'll touch a little bit on that, but what I really want to do is talk about how the people that are around us in the Cayo area in particular, but all over the Maya forest, are actually people who are enlightened by the long, deep history we have. And many people you probably know are master forest gardeners, and we're talking to them. We can learn so much about this landscape and about how the Milpa Forest Gardens operate, how they interact with both humans, human needs, and the landscape itself, the animals and plants. And they're really the links to the natural cycle. And if we're lucky,
Maya farmer Alfonso Sewell explains that even the Maya today don't know the answer.
Well, one of the things that I realized is that when we were going to school, they used to tell us that the Mayas used to live in this country and then they disappeared. Nobody knew what happened to them. So we were not able to connect ourselves with the present civilizations that are visible with the various ancient monuments that are left in Belize. So one day I met a fellow from the US, I think, and he was looking at the ancient monuments in my farm. And he said, "Wow, what a wonderful work." He said, "I wonder where those Mayas went to." I said, "They didn't go anywhere." "What do you mean?" "No, they didn't go anywhere." "Where they are?" So I told him, "You are talking to one of them." We were not taught about the history of our people. It was in my adult age that I managed to read all these things about the Mayas, and I'm able to connect them with myself.
so I think that all of you know that there's Maya in your midst, but I really feel that Alfonso Sewell brings it very close. You're talking to one. So what was the attraction? You might think that at least the world outside saying the Maya disappeared, they often think that the Maya destroyed the landscape instead of created this landscape that you have there, the Maya forest, which I say is a product of human and environmental interactions over these millennia. In fact, the forest is what I call a cropscape that was shaped by human hands that would, and represents something of a successful land use practices. Sometimes people wonder why they came to the Maya forest, but you can see in this slide that the medium and high fertility areas is almost 50% of the whole region, meaning that this was a very good area for agriculture. But as you must all know, I guess it still might be raining, but somewhere around February to March, it becomes a dry season. And it's after May to June that the wet season comes. And this is a little image of annual precipitation in the Flores area. You can see the canicula, and you can see the different periods of kinds of rain. We have the rain that is coming from the Caribbean, and rain that's coming from the north. You're just still probably impacted by rains coming from North America and the Atlantic. Also, another factor is that there you can see that different rainfall is greater in the south and less in the north. It affects how land use is as well. Let's see, getting it to move is another matter. Cynthia mentioned the 20 dominant trees of the Maya forest. Here is a list of them. And these are trees that you can see around, perhaps even in your own gardens. And you can see around the forest and in areas that are certainly at the Living Museum of El Pilar. All of these trees are useful and have significant contribution to how the civilization thrived. For example, bay leaf. It's for food and also for thatching. How could you thatch a house? How could you put a a roof on a house if there wasn't thatching. Brosimum alocastrum is breadfruit or bread nut. And this is another important one. The chicle industry would have not been able to thrive without the fodder from the ramon tree. And chicle, of course, itself. Cahoon is another one. Think of all of these trees that you might have. Mahogany, you know, Mayflower, a beautiful tree that has flowers that are really quite striking. And this one, wormwood, that's, I can't say it, Piscidea, piscopula is actually, it's called a poison, but it's actually a poison that actually is used for fish. It kills fish, it poisons or loosens them up so they can be caught, stops them from being fish, I guess. Almost all of these have different uses that you probably can find out more for me. I don't know, I guess that I have to figure out how to use this one. So how do these trees come about? A lot of people speak very poorly about the milpa and slash and burn, not understanding that it is really a system of building perennials. So all those trees that we witnessed in the Maya forest, those 20 dominant trees, they are part of the perennial flora that are important trees for Maya to use. And you can see here that what happens is that we open up a field for planting. Those are short-term annuals, and even in those fields there'll be trees, and those trees are favored by the Maya for their future uses. Then after a short time, sometimes people call it abandoned or left somehow, but in fact it moves from a field to fast-growing perennials, sometimes called second growth. But these fast-growing perennials are very useful, usually for sticks for houses. They can be also for firewood. They also have medicinal and all the other kinds of uses that we find in the forest are begun in these fast-growing perennials. And then before the cycle is ended, another 8 years are used to mature canopy trees. All the trees that were in the secondary fast-growing perennials will have matured, producing other kinds of important factors like the ramon tree for both the fruit and the nut, as well as the fodder, fruit trees, wood that grows larger like cedar and mahogany. So you can imagine that these are ways that the Maya directed from the infield to the outfield and how they use this landscape in a very complex, dynamic way. I want to go through this and maybe there'll be kinds of familiar scenes to you. This is an infield garden in home garden in Yucatan. You can see that there's many trees in the yard and also enough sun to get some chilies dried. I think it's a beautiful image to think of how they use this landscape right near at hand. Also in the fields, and this is a Lacandon field, they have field houses. These would not be permanent houses, but they would be places that they would be staying when they needed to be out in the field longer, and a number of other ways that they would be used also for keeping goods from the field. Now the fire tender, I call it fire tender, yum ikob. Maybe there's someone who speaks Mayan in the audience here, but ik is wind, and really these fire tenders are wind tenders. They really know the wind. And we know we've had many problems with fires, and it's because the knowledge of use of fire, which was so critical to those early people who were coming into the area, understanding the use of fire, very important part of the cycle of the milpa, is something we need to really work on and understand better now and promote the understanding of, so we don't have wildfires in the forests. Like El Pilar, we lost probably 80% of the forest to a forest fire this past May. Here is a milpa field recently burned. You can see there are trees there, and some of these smaller trees you see in the front would be resprouting, hastening the perennial components. So it's a very complex use of fire and plants. And even though it looks like it might be a moonscape, this is really going to be a vital space in short time after the planting. Now, one of the things people say is how did the Maya live in these rocky areas? Well, they didn't have to plow. If you're looking for arable land, you will not find it where the Maya lived, because arable means plowable. And they were not using a plow. They actually walked with a digging stick and dropped the seeds into the holes in a very no-till. Some of the ways people are arguing we need to be planting. This is a no-till method and a very prominent way that the Maya used the landscape. Very soon it becomes green. There are up to 30 different planted crops in this. You can see, I can see beans and squash and the maize, but probably many, many other things in this field that is selected from a basket full of more than 100 different crops. Plus there's different kinds of things we might call weeds, but they're actually herbs that attract various kinds of bugs that would otherwise eat the maize, and other kinds of complex ways that these landscapes are used for herbs and medicines. Another way, here's Diego and his grandson in another field. You can see lots of different things happening in that field. Of course, the yield and the crops are very important. And again, this is something that's done with knowledge and human labor. I wonder if when you look at this, this field that you think it's a dead field, because it isn't. All the corn you can see is broken and is laying down, you know, is facing down, getting ready to be harvested when they need to. Of course, this is a way both to conserve the maize while it's still on the sticks of the maize stalks. And the greenery that you see are already beans starting to grow up. So this is a very important thing to see how many different phases are shown at one moment in a field. Soon after approximately 4 years, these fields become I guess cluttered with the different kinds of trees that have been planted and nurtured over the time of the milpa growing. And here's an example. Of course, in prehistoric times, they would not have had plantains or bananas, but here is a way that you can create short-term perennials that shade the growing trees that are in this building perennial field. And you can see the field is in an area of high forest. When people think of these areas, these secondary growth, the building perennial component, they often say resting or abandon, but that is really not saying the truth at all. This is an area where, and you can see here, Chaco is pruning the siricote. Siricote is a very good fruit. It also grows very straight and tall in this way of trimming and pruning to be a very good hardwood. And if you ask perhaps your grandparents or even your parents may know that these leaves make very good cleaning for pots that get dirty. They have a sandpaper quality to them. So this is quite a lot of investment in something that was called abandoned. And they aren't resting. It's a whole new dynamic. And it turns out that even in the Maya middens, we get a lot of evidence of animals that would like these, we call ecotones, zones between open and closed areas, like deer, one of the more important protein sources of the Maya. Here is an example of an orchard. You can still see some of the bananas and lots of different herbs growing. There are 5 different kinds of trees. I see mango and orange, both I would call global gardens, but there are also allspice and other kinds of trees in this photo. But what you can see is that it's dynamic and different, and this is something that's feeding people. This is a source of sovereignty, as Cynthia mentioned. This is food sovereignty, not just one kind of tree here, but many kinds, with different kinds of fruiting periods, different kinds of leaves, different kinds of animals and plants and insects can thrive in this kind of environment. Here's an allspice forest. The person who has this one considers him a wealthy agriculturalists, because this is very productive. In the months of August and September, they do the yield and reaping of the allspice, a very, very important product. And you can see that allspice, the leaves make it not as easy for plants to grow. So it's also very easy to collect the seeds in this kind of context. And of course, this is on the cover of my book. And if you are interested, I have PDFs of the book in Spanish and in English, looking at this wonderful reserve. All the forest gardeners that I've ever interviewed always keep a reserve. And this reserve is not a reserve that's not to be touched. It's a place where you go collect your roofing materials, where you collect your oil from palms with oil. I want to call the corozo the American palm and start promoting it as opposed to the African palm. And of course, where you can get vines. In the days when the Maya were making their own houses and weren't getting zinc, they needed vines to wrap the different components of houses. And vines only grow, usable vines only grow in the tall forest, where you can actually get long vines for binding. Are there any questions? You're all with me? These gardens and forests are really managed and maintained by these people I call the heroes of the Maya forest. And it's through them I have learned so much of the values and the wealth that, in fact, your song says wealth untold. I hope you can help tell it. But these heroes are slowly dying, and with them, it's like an encyclopedia. The practices that they are involved with leave with them. Beatrice Waite was a wonderful midwife.
Excuse me, Gian
Yes.
raised his hand.
Okay. Yes.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
I don't know if it's true or not, but I have heard that there's a tree that repels mosquitoes. Do you have any?
Well, I don't know of tree, but you know, when I'm out in the forest with Narciso and I have mosquitoes, he goes and gets a thing he calls buttonwood, which is some kind of piper, but there are many kinds of buttonwood, and he grabs it in his hand and he does like this, and then he gives it to me, and you go like this, put it all over your neck, and those mosquitoes stop bothering you. So I think that's a bush, though. It's not a tree. There could be a tree too.
What is it called?
Buttonwood is what he calls it. I can look up. It's a piper. It's a smaller bush, perennial bush, and the leaves are very distinct. But I think that we could ask him, and I could find out a way to let you know more. But he calls it buttonwood. It's of the species piper. These are the heroes of the Maya forest, and I'm sure if you go ask someone who's been around in Benque for a while, they would know too. Anyone who is a chiclero, your community is a source of chicleria. But we're losing those information, and we really can't do that. We have to know it, because those are the things that will carry us forward. Without knowing them, with losing them is not a way forward. Who else is this? Leonardo Bondo. This is a man who had many cows, and you know, I really don't like to see cows. They seem to be the ones that are chomping and clomping and keeping the forest away. He would plant Ramon trees, and the Ramon leaves were excellent for the cows. He also had bees, and bees need both water and flowers. So he was a very insightful forest gardener who is no longer with us too. And Alcariocano, he was the one of the leaders of the village of Santa Familia, and was very taken with the opportunity to create the Canancash, the Maya, the school garden in Santa Familia, which always needs help from volunteers who want to learn the practice of forest gardening with Narciso and other people who are working there. And of course, Heriberto Cocom, another wonderful farmer who had a place that you could have actually visited, and he called it the Three Sisters. But now he died, and it's been broken up, and all the trees that he had have been cut, just not thinking of the future. And when we think of those wonderful forest gardeners, how do we connect them to this past that I've been talking about? Well, I am confident that they were practicing forest gardening at the time of contact. And here you can see that the same milpa cycle, diverse fields, the orchards, and the forest gardens were being legislated against. This man, Tomas Lopez Medel, who went on to do mischief in Colombia as well, set about to stop the Maya from living in the way they did by saying that they should not construct their houses in the way they were, and they should be close together. There should be no sown land or groves, and if there were, they should be burned. It's more dramatic in Spanish. I wonder if anyone there wants to speak the Spanish. Se prohibió la presencia de monte dentro de espacios urbanos. In fact, you could not have trees. They didn't want, they call it monte, you know, generally. They didn't see the kinds of species. They didn't see that it was fruit trees and medicine trees and fodder. You know, he says that que todos los pueblos se poblasen al modo de los españoles. It was glossed, houses close together, but really he was saying, I want this place to look like the Spanish.
Presentando.
¿Sí? ¿Quieres seguir? A fin que estuviesen limpios, sin cementerias ni arboledas, y si algunas habían, se quemasen. So I don't know how much they went and actually acted on this, because I haven't found the evidence that they did, but there was certainly an intention, and this was critical. This little map on the side is something that was done by an architect who was looking at vernacular buildings in Mexico. You can see that their lifestyle continued, and this lifestyle is something that moderates temperature, inhibits erosion, builds soil, and we're facing the same kind of temperature crises that they faced in 3,000 years ago. And the answer really is to look to the forest gardens. Here's an example of, you can see where Benque is. Well, no, this is Benque here. This is San Ignacio and Santa Elena. And you can see how much the world has been changing. How much has been, just in the last 20 years, has been cleared. So we really do need to look at what we're doing to the Maya forest. And that same pattern of infield and outfield can be seen in the Yucatan today, and certainly in Benque I've seen. So here's, if you just look, maybe look here where it's cleared, and see it in a couple of years' time, you can see that it's growing back, changing with clearing up in the north, and then it seems to be going back. I don't know what it's doing. We hopefully will get there. And here it is later in 2012. I can't seem to get it to go further. Let me see if I can't. There we go. And then here's a community called Peach. You can see that the infield home gardens exist, and the outfield milpas exist, something you can still see today. Now, when I went to start my field work in the Maya area, it was really felt that the way of using slash and burn was something that was going to expend the entire forest. And this is an image based on a National Geographic in the 1980s, saying that the Maya fields kept the forest at bay. And I show this to some of my forest gardeners. They think it looks like the Mennonites. It's all looking like plowed fields. You can see they're square. Why would the Maya have that? It's not a realistic view. So I created this little cartoon to show what it might look like. So here is the same area, and you can see open fields, secondary growth, and higher mature forest, but it's changing all the time. It's not something that is always a field. It's changing throughout all the time, making a very dynamic landscape, never leaving it open like this, but always in a different kind of cover, creating this wonderful forest garden landscape. It's not trading, it's a cycle. It's not forest or field, it's forest and field. And I've talked to, some 20 or so different forest gardeners. Here's 18 forest gardeners that we found. They were nurturing 650 species together, and they included every kind of thing, trees, shrubs, herbs, vines, epiphytes, palms, ferns, grasses, and 60% of the species that they had in their gardens were native to the Maya forest. Now, I mean, we don't expect you not to have mangoes or oranges, lemons, so forth, because these are bananas, sugarcane. All those are global gardens, but they are adopted in the tropics all over today. And these plants are used for medicine, ornaments, food, spices, dyes. They're for toys, poisons, construction products, just almost anything you need. Instead of going to the supermarket, you would be able to walk around and get everything you needed right around your own home. And we think of it as now, as I've learned, that it's a naturally adapted botanical world that maintains the soil, conserves water, maintains biodiversity, and feeds people. And that is something I think today is really, really important. And I call them heroes. They're collaborators. They're ready to help. All we need to do is gather them together and ask them for help. And one of the ways they've helped, I mentioned the school garden. This is Kanankash, a well cared for landscape. This is where we want to see no child left indoors, valuing these trees as the wealth untold. Find the relevance of your traditions and the impact of climate. I mean, I'm sure that if you're waiting for a bus, you don't go wait in the sun, you look in the shade, and the shade of a tree is much more fresh than any other place. Check the temperature, go out with a temperature gauge. You go out in the hot sun in the street, you'll find it goes up to maybe, I don't know, in Fahrenheit, it could go to 120, 30 degrees, but you go under the tree and you probably get 70 or 80 degrees, really a big change. Also, it's conserving water and it's a solar collector. So we really want to encourage more gardens in the world. And to do so, I created a little urban garden. This is a house I rented in 2005. And you can see virtually no tree at all. In 2 years, this is what the forest gardeners helped me create. You can see that I have quite a lot of trees, and in the back as well. And here you can see in the front, when people come to try to find my house, I say, they ask what color it is. I tell them it's the only one with trees. You can look down this whole street. It's the only one that has trees. And it's always fresh and comfortable. And hopefully we see more of this happening in Cayo. Some of the things that, wow, it looks like you can't see very well. But anyway, the kinds of things I've learned, I've gone out with hunter forest gardeners, and they bring a hammock. The story I have, this person, Chencho, he goes out hunting with a hammock. He goes and sits in the hammock and takes a snooze while the animals come to him. And then I was wanting to find some water, and the damselfly cannot live without running water. And so if you see a damselfly, you have running water. Another thing I've learned. And because of the forest itself, I feel it's an aesthetic. It's something that we have to incorporate and use as a living museum. And this is what I want to see at El Pilar, the aesthetic of archaeology under the canopy. What we saw and what are we honoring? So this beautiful Maya forest, this is what was seen in the 1830s. And this is what they redid. And the question is this honoring the heritage? Because the heritage of the Maya is not just the monuments, but it's also the forest. Here's another example. This is at Tikal. Here is what I saw. I saw this mask in the, I guess it was the Acropolis at Tikal. And this is what it was in 1972. And this is what it is today. Not at all the visible mask. it's because of these, the surfaces exposed like that draw in these biofilms. If you have a biology program, biofilms are a natural process. They're everywhere, but they form on these surfaces of the rocks, and they take up the salt that has formed on the top of the rocks, and they drop acid on limestone, turns it to dust. And that's what's happened at Tikal, something we don't want to see at El Pilar. And then I wanted to just let you know about LIDAR. LIDAR is another way to look at archaeology under canopy. And here's a little sequence of how we've been mapping over the decades, starting in the 1980s and working right up until last year. We were unable to get in the field last year, but you can see that we have covered about 14 square kilometers. And if any of you want to be an archaeologist, you could be, the next time I'm down and you're interested in learning how to do archaeological survey, you could come on with us. We also go out with forest gardeners. Our maps are all tied to the 20 dominant plants. We we go and record those at every site. And so it's a great learning experience for the values that are part of the Maya forest.
Dr. Anabel.
Yes.
I have a question. I have been raising my hand, but it seems that Mr. Justin fell asleep, no?
Okay, well, come on in. What do you want? We don't want that. Mr. Justin, come on, wake up.
Yeah, I have
I'm right
questions.
Okay, he was yawning. You heard that?
My first question relates to the gardens at the school level, no? The projects you are encouraging. We had recently last week a seminar with all the deans and the Ministry of Education personnel in relation to the vision that this government has to revise the school curriculum given the pandemic and what it has brought, no? And there is mention of introducing agriculture and encouraging agriculture at the school level, from elementary level. And my question is, has there been any attempt for you to connect with the Ministry of Education to probably contribute this concept, no, of indigenous Maya heritage, as part of the program? That's my first question.
Let me address that. I wouldn't mind your help. I have had many conversations, especially with Belizean studies. I have a whole document I prepared for Belizean studies last April to show the connection between the past and the present, and how El Pilar and the forest gardens are critical. In fact, we're developing a museum exhibition that would be a permanent exhibition at the Museum of Belize, which of course hasn't moved exactly as we planned for a variety of reasons, as you understand. But I feel very strongly that the forest garden, it's not agriculture, so it's a way to build this heritage connection and link with these just brilliant people that we meet all over. I have done tours with set up with Cynthia with the library service, where we went to all the districts, and there are forest gardeners everywhere. And we really need to draw them out and bring them to this project, like this project to have more food in our own lives. Sovereignty is what we call it, food sovereignty.
Right, so perhaps at some point we could invite you to give a lecture to the association of deans.
Well, let's follow up. That is something very, very much and having more of these school gardens.
My second question relates to what you said about this whole attempt at restoring and presenting the Maya civilization as a structure-oriented, no? Where does this story of the ecological degradation and due to deforestation come in, if the Mayas were, as you say, forest oriented, no?
Yeah. Well, where does it come in? It comes in, I have a wonderful article. It's just going to be published that I can share with you ahead of time. It's called Conserving the American Tropics, but it's really what I call ecological imperialism. It's really founded in the fact that people from temperate zones are looking at this area and they can't understand it. The very fact, I have a wonderful map from Guatemala printed in 1981 that talks about where is cultivable land. And they show the whole area around Tikal as not cultivable. Well, cultivable for them is arable, and arable is plowable, and the Maya forest is not. The Maya, where the Maya lived in the limestone hills, is not plowable. They're correct, but it's not that it's not cultivable. It's cultivable in a different way. You have to have a different view. You have to be a broader sense of what the milpa cycle really is. And it's really it's a product of colonialism. And really, Belizean studies deserves to really focus on this kind of thing. The denigration, the negation of the whole traditional way of using the landscape has been called primitive, unsophisticated. It's been called inadequate to support the people. Well, the Maya, the classic period alone is almost 1,000 years long. Now, I don't know about sustainability, but that sure seems sustainable to me. And it's obligatory of us to find out how. Is that possible?
Yeah. So it makes sense. It makes sense what you're saying.
Yeah, you grew up, didn't you have home gardens when you were growing up?
Of course, yeah. And you know, with the pandemic, there's a kind of a return to that, especially in Bengue.
Wonderful, wonderful.
The traditional medicines, yeah.
Well, Bengue, always, I've given lectures at the House of Culture there, always. I can remember one time I gave a talk about the home gardens and someone said, hold on. They went home and came back and had caimitos for us from their backyard. So, you know, at every season, there's something to have. It's very important. And like you say, and I think that was one of the things that Cynthia has worked on too, that people really should be looking at how you can, in your local area, you don't have to eat, you know, potato chips. You can have a wonderful caimito instead.
So going back to the decline of the civilization, what is your view on that?
They didn't decline. They didn't decline because when the Maya were found, when the Spanish found them, they had smaller temples. I mean, they did neglect the big temples like at Tikal and El Pilar, but neglect does not mean abandoned. It just means neglect. And at the time of conquest, they were still writing the same writing that they had then. Now it turns out they can read it on the stela. They were astronomically, you know, they knew the astronomy. They obviously were thriving, you know, all the same kinds of things that we draw on. We can draw analogies from the time of conquest, but they don't want to do the analogy of how they lived on the landscape. And one of the things they do also is they talk about overpopulation. Well, one of the problems is how they count the houses. If houses were also had temporary houses and permanent houses. Right now I'm working with a team with my LIDAR and survey work. I have the 14 square kilometers and we have, let's say we have 700, I can't remember what the total, we have something like 700 or 800 residential domestic sites, but only 580 of them look like permanent houses. Now, what do I call a permanent house? Anyone who grows up, maybe even in Bengue now, when you have a kitchen and the kitchen is using fire, do you have that in your home or outside in a separate building? Don't you have it in a separate building?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is fire insurance. You know, I mean, that's where you wouldn't have a house without two buildings, a minimum of two buildings. So that's how I'm looking at the landscape. If I have two buildings, I know it's likely to be a permanent house. If it has one small building, that can't be a permanent house. So we need to think about how we're looking at population as well. It really changes things.
So you're saying that there was really not a decline rather than
A
probably
change.
a shift, yeah, a
Yeah,
shift, and
a shift.
probably the conquest,
That was the decline.
yeah, the
That was the,
decimation of the
right.
population.
90% of the people who were living, 90% of the population that was encountered by the Spanish were dead within 50 years. That's pretty extreme. We're lucky we know something about the forest gardens with that kind of, impact. And I feel very strongly we need to, that the plants are part of the archaeology. I mean, all of them are useful. I've accumulated a list of almost 200 trees that I've found listed as conserved in milpas and from the literature. And every one of them I've gone over with some of the forest gardeners. I thought we could just whip through them. These are things that produce mahawa. You know what mahawa is? You can strip the bark off of certain kinds of trees, and you can use it for making, carrying a mekapal, for carrying, backpacks. They have a smell. They know when the fruit is ripe, what the shape of the leaf is. It's phenomenal, the kinds of things. They smell, many different ways that the forest is represented in. And what's this shrub you have right outside your school there? It starts with a C. I always am forgetting what it is. It has a little red berry or fruit. It's edible. It's right outside your building there. Don't know. Is that, can you still hear me? Are we still on?
I think so. I think
Yes,
like
we're hearing you.
Did you hear me?
What was the question again?
You have this outside of the school, the J. Paul.
John Paul,
John Paul, just outside as you're coming up, or you're facing it. It's on the left side. Is a bush that has a lot of fruits on it. Sometime maybe in a couple of months.
Is it Capulina?
Capulin, yes. I don't know how it starts with a C, but I always am forgetting what that is. I had just learned it when I came one time when I came up to visit the school, and I couldn't believe it. Everywhere I stopped, I saw that capulin. Thank you. And it's a very tasty little fruit. Just right there, don't cut it down. So I don't know, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so that same capulin and all the other plants, I want to have that as a new aesthetic for inviting people to explore and discover and embrace culture and nature in the Maya forest. And that's what we see at El Pilar, as a living museum, ancient monuments in the context of their environment, conserving the monuments because they're offering shade, and also shading the visitors with a new appreciation for the forest, right? And here is an example of the LiDAR, has some of the houses. This is a house, gosh, I don't know what's happening now after the fire, but this was a house and forest garden that we had excavated and then created buildings there. And you can see that we know a lot more now that we got the LiDAR, and we have the new maps. And here we can see that it is a living museum. It can frame the monuments, it doesn't detract from them. And this monument, El Pilar, has architecture in Belize and Guatemala, and a chance to have people like you at the border towns honor another border town. And it created as a peace park. I see it as a peace park initiative where we can see regional conservation for the very wonderful qualities of the culture and nature of the Maya forest. I want to think a little bit of how you all in Benque, with the traditions of the Maya forest, could really imagine helping put El Pilar on the map and show how the kinds of traditions that you have in your community are things that we can actually witness in the forest itself. Remember about climate change. And really this, the idea of the forest garden is really action for climate change. It will help reduce temperature. It'll build and maintain biodiversity. It will conserve water, just the shade alone. Having trees, their leaves drop down and enhance the soil. And with plants on the surface, it inhibits erosion, things that will, you know, cause floods if you don't take care. And again, it cares for people. And again, as we were talking about just a moment ago, really gives you sovereignty that you will know what you eat because you have it right there. And I think that working with your team, we could actually see how the traditions that are so part of Benkei are really part of the Maya forest. And would like to open a discussion of how we can look at the creativity and Maya forest gardens, just like you were talking about with the making a presentation to your deans. I know that you have a lot of the history of the land use of the Maya forest. For example, if you know what tinto is, it's it created stable dyes. It was the important base for dyes prior to aniline, and it created a very important black dye, which you can imagine was a very important color. How can you have furniture without the wonderful mahogany? It's another thing from the Maya forest. No chewing gum without
Excuse
chicle.
me, Dr. Ford, is the tinto the same logwood?
Logwood, yes, that's logwood, exactly. And you know, they cut all the logwood down in north of Spanish Lookout and are trying to grow, or probably bringing a lot of fertilizers and growing, I think it was rice, but those kinds of things, by taking away the woods, we are going to have real problems with water, and that goes drains into the Laboring Creek and down river to Belize. Of course, vanilla and chocolate are both very important, especially in the valley of Belize River. Cacao was reported as a very important resource at the time of contact, and also vanilla. Vanilla grows all over El Pilar, but we lack the animal to the insect that actually pollinates. You have to hand pollinate if you want to have the vanilla. And I really feel that that the Maya set the table for us, you know, and the conservation of the forest and these resources is what Cynthia was talking about as the wealth untold. And here is an educational destination that can draw you into an experience of archaeology under the canopy. And this is what it looks like. Well, it looked like last time I was there, we'll say, and a way it could look if we created this archaeology under the canopy, bringing back the forest and having it shade the resources that we've already excavated and know about. And you asked me to propose propose something, and this is what I thought. If your students would be interested in taking action along these lines of the forest gardening, they can help document it right in your own community. Identify plants in your yards and in your neighbors' yards. If you know something about chaya, mahogany, ramon, caimito, and many, many others. Interview your parents and grandparents' generation on the history of their relationship to forests and gardens, just like we were talking about. I remember actually talking to Santiago Juan. He is actually trying to revive the way that he grew up with the gardens. Inventory belongings. You know, your family, people in Benkei must have, you know, different kinds of things like the espolon that you use to for the cutting of the chicle, or you know, what do you know? Is it pilon, the name of the big vat that you cook the chicle in?
Pilon is like the pestle and mortar for
okay.
The rice.
Yeah, right. What's the name of the big
caldero, like caldero?
Caldero. It had a special name, but yes. Do you guys have that? I mean, those are things that are important. At El Pilar, we have chicle trees that have the cuts. These things are really an important part of it. Of course, ollas, kitchen utensils. What do you call with Luine, the blender? You can make foam up like chocolate with that, with those trees. I'm sure that if you talk to people and map the locations of historic buildings in your town, you have a lot of calicanto there, you know, and where are home gardens? I mean, if we could make a map of Benke with the home gardens, you could make those as destinations for visits. And then I still ask, does anyone want to be an archaeologist? So I think that's the conclusion for me. I take more questions and more enthusiasm, and I really want to see. I want to follow up with you on that, on the forest garden possibilities.
So we open the floor to questions. I know you have several questions. But before you begin, I just want to say that I am concerned, as Dr. Ford kind of alluded to in this whole issue of ecological pain that we're going through as a global community. But traditionally, what we've been used to that separates a Benke from Sokots, that buffer zone of green on the hill. I'm concerned because that's private property, and we've already seen they've been digging into the deforesting the hill and digging into the hill for construction.
Oh my.
Being sold to, again,
causing more potential erosion.
Yeah, Chinese business guy. And, you know, I'm concerned because I know that, you know, in a few years, that will be a bygone site, you know, with the green. So we really need to promote
yeah, raise interest in how, I mean, those are views, you know, one of the things that really is shocking is what they did in Flores. Flores was a historical island town, and they built a huge modern, I don't know, you know, supermarket mall in the very view with Pollo Campero, and no one, that took away a historic view that had been seen that way for hundreds of years. So when we don't know what we got till it's gone.
Right. So questions, comments, anybody?
Is that, have anyone want to be an archaeologist? Anyone know about a Manon Matate in their house?
I was gonna ask us. I heard that you said that something about when you get down to Belize, we could join you. And
yes,
that will be very interesting.
Okay, well, as you know, I'm going to be in touch with your dean, and that, I mean, it would be wonderful to have students up there. I've had a number of times I've had students, and really some great stories. The second year I was up there, we were backfilling the looters' trenches, you know, counting them. They're like over 65 there, and backfilling them. And we had a whole bunch of students helping us, and we were passing rocks one at a time. And then one person said, wait, this rock has a face on it. And my field director says, oh yeah, and you can see a face up in the clouds. But then he picked it up, and there was the keen face. It was the face of the sun god looking at him. So you never know. Yeah, so why don't you send, you can get my email, and you can send me a note, and we can start having a conversation with you, huh?
Okay, perfect. I think Mr. Dean has the
yes.
email. I'll ask
oh yeah.
Do you know, Dr. Ford, when is your next trip?
Oh, don't I wish. I can put my email right here to everyone in the chat. I'm anxious to come, as you can well imagine. The situation here, my university is telling us not to go further than 120 miles. I don't know why they say 120 miles. They say if you go further, then when you come back, you can't come out to campus for 2 weeks. So that's something. But you know, I want to make sure. I don't. How are things? How do you feel things are where you are?
Well, the second wave has kind of curved down, no?
That's good.
We have less and less
Presence.
yeah, of incidents, yeah, of the virus, the results, no, people infected is going down significantly. Quantified. Said like last night was down to 7
in the whole country, huh?
The whole country after.
Oh, that's very good.
Now today is 4.
Yeah, well, that's a lot better than we are here. We're in the hundreds.
Right. And there's saying about the vaccine coming in March. So
wow.
We don't know. Belize has gotten 150,000 doses, no, as part of the Caribbean initiative.
Well, that should be sufficient to cover everyone, right?
Well, at least the people, yeah, the people 60 and above, no. Yeah, but well, hopefully, no, we're hoping.
Yeah, well, I'm going to come as soon as I can. I don't know exactly when it will be. I thought I might be able to come in January, but that's passed.
Okay.
But let's stay in touch, and certainly with remote learning, we can do a lot to set up things that when I come next. Anyone interested in
the question?
Oh yes, please.
The school program that you mentioned, the garden, the forest garden in schools, that model, has it been implemented in the Belize community?
No, it's in Santa Familia, but we would like to do it in Bullet Tree. The school, the Catholic school there doesn't have a lot of space. So we have, we have a little, oddly, I don't know how it's so wonderful. The Santa Familia school has 10 acres and they gave a corner, 1 acre of land for this project, but it should be modeled. It can be modeled smaller. We started a little project at the high school in the St. Ignatius High School. But it seems to me that we should be able to model it anywhere. So you can help. Are you in Bullet Tree? Well, what can we do?
Definitely.
I mean, is Victor Plutz still the principal?
I have no idea. I'm actually in Benke. I do have family in Bullet Tree though.
Well, we had that small, we had a place where the little place that was called Bay Pukte. That needs to be Bay Pukte. You know, the little area.
What?
We need to
Can I talk to you later on about that?
Will you please? I sent my email. Please, yes. We need to repossess it. That could be where the forest garden is.
I will email you.
Okay.
I will email you.
Carla, I'm going to follow up if you don't.
No, I will email you. Thank you.
Gracias. Other questions? Anything else you want to know? There's a lot of you there. Come on.
I'll say one more thing.
Okay.
AP the second, start a forest garden.
You got the start of it. You got the how do you say it again? Tell me again. What's the name of that plant? Columpio. Capulin. I don't know why I can't remember it. Capulin. Like a champion capulin.
I'll come volunteer, Mr. David, to help out with that.
All right, you're on. Carla, you can't get away.
Well, Carla is always welcome, no?
Very good. She's definitely thinking ahead.
The thing is that sometimes she goes missing in action.
Oh, she does. Well, we won't let her.
I can't be everywhere all the time.
But Carla, if we get our students in, no, I guess something that we can do this year, no?
I would volunteer to try to help out with that, Mr. David, for sure.
Okay. Okay, anybody would like to be a leader in this?
Yeah, I think, well, we
At the
know Carla
school?
will lead it, and there, you've got 20 other
Yeah.
people there who can help.
Anybody wants to?
Shayna, that's a nice name. Does Shayna have anything to say?
She would not.
It's Zena.
Zena.
Zena, are you in?
I see her.
Sure, why not?
Would you like to be part of the project?
She says, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm counting on her too, and I'll remember how to pronounce her name. Carla, you remember that, okay?
So Carla, Zena will be your liaison. I don't know how you say it.
Definitely. I've worked with Zena before.
Okay. But we can't forget Bullet Tree.
Definitely not. I will email you.
We're thinking that all of Kaya will be the forest garden. We'll make a forest garden everywhere.
For sure.
Excellent. And you'll be able to collect the seeds of what you need up at El Pilar. That's part of the whole thing of this community participation at El Pilar. Well,
so any other question?
I wanted to ask if you would send copies of your books to Mr. David so that
I will do that. I will do it in Spanish and English.
Thank you.
I think it would be really important to share it with you. I don't have any more of the books myself, but the PDF I do. And believe me, and it will, if you read it, and I really encourage you to look especially at chapter 2 and 3. Very, very important. The whole thing is, and it's readable. I understand it's readable. So we'll put it in your library as a PDF.
Is the El Pilar open now? Is it open
is.
to the
It's
public?
open.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's open to the public. Definitely.
And is there a fee for? Is it under the niche?
It's an art. Yeah, it's niche. So if you go on Sunday, but you know, with education, all you do is you write them, and then they send you a car. With education, you're welcome anytime.
Actually, Belizeans have to pay $5 on Sundays too now.
Oh, really? Well, get the education one, then you don't have to pay. And you know, there are things that we could imagine doing up there with you. So let's think about that. I'm going to count on that, Miss Carla.
Oh.
She's the connection. It's between Benke to Bullet Tree to El Pilar.
Okay.
Well, I had a great time talking with you. I hope that you bring questions. You have my email, so you can send me a note, and we can share ideas.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ford. Before I call on Shamira, who will say the vote of thanks, Dr. Ford, it's been a privilege, an honor to see you and to listen to you again.
Let's do it more.
Yeah, you know, we heard from Dr. Awel on Monday, and one thing I can say about archaeologists, they are so passionate about their work. No?
We're lucky. We're just lucky.
You know, it's palpable. I can sense that, and I'm sure all of you sense the love, the dedication, the passion behind the work Dr. Anabel is doing, and the fact that it's in Belize and
right at your border.
Right, and as I said to Dr. Awe, I mean, we're so close. We're part of this valley of kings and queens that flourished 2,000 years ago or somewhat, and sometimes because of how the kind of history we've been exposed to, in a way, we have not really come to appreciate what we have and what we're heirs to, and how much we can learn from that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Right. And hopefully, you know, if once this pandemic is over, we'll be able to come out with a renewed energy to
Yes, and
do
really plant our
better things.
trees and
Right.
benefit from
Yeah.
the. I mean, realize we can do that right now, and we can actually be ready for the reunion
Right.
later on.
Exactly. So
Look,
and
in 2
now,
years, what my house looked like. You can do it.
right. So I call now on Shamira to say a few words of thanks.
Dr. Anabel Ford, we enjoyed your presentation. We highly appreciate your collaboration, your time, and the useful information that you shared is so important because we gain knowledge about the Maya forest from our Pilar. And I want to thank you in behalf of my teacher, my classmates, and everybody who joined us today for sharing your experience. And I would like to give you a special greetings from Mrs. Emilia Toraya.
Oh, Amelia. Now there's
Yes.
a good, oh, da los gracias y dale abrazos.
Sure, I will. Thank you very much
Immediately.
for sharing. Thank
I
you
miss
very
her.
much
I
for
miss her.
sharing. Yes.
And Dr. Ford, when you're back in Belize, we have a nice, beautiful T-shirt of our school.
I want that. Thank you. I'm
right.
planning on that.
Okay.
But in the meantime, we're going to work together anyway, and we're going to talk
Yes.
about how we can get more gardens in the schools and talk with your deans.
Okay.
Definitely.
All right. So thank you very much once again. I would like to thank Pat Asling, who joined us all the way from Ontario, from Oxbridge in Toronto.
Wow.
In Canada. Pat was with us serving at the House of Culture for many, many years, and she lived in Belize. Mm-hmm. She lived in Belize. How long, Pat? 20 years?
Oh, you got to take off you got to unzip, as one of my friends say.
Yeah.
Hi there.
How many?
16.
Yeah, weren't you at the head of House of Culture when I gave a talk there?
That's right.
Yeah.
I met you quite a few times, actually.
Yeah, but I'm thinking of that one time when they went and got the caimito.
Yeah. So Pat, it was so good to see you and to have you with us. And we'll keep you informed when we have this sort of presentations. No, I know your heart is divided and you would like to be with us as well, no? At some point.
I would love to be there.
Yes. So thank you very much to everybody for being with us this evening, and we'll be in touch, and take care. And
thank you again.
See you on Monday.
Not forgetting you, Carla.
So students will have classes on Monday, but we won't have classes on Wednesday. Okay. So have a good evening. Have a very good and rested weekend.
Okay, let's be in touch too.
Yes.
Don't forget.
God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye.